New findings reveal an alarming link between ultra-processed foods and the brain. Virginia Tech researchers warn that just one serving of red deli meat could raise cognitive issues by 17%. It's sparking questions about the long-term impact of processed foods. Let's bring in Dr. Mark Siegel, the Fox News senior medical analyst and the Miracles Among Us author. Dr. Siegel, thank you for joining us this weekend. Red deli meat, messing with my head. What's going on here?
Well, Rich, we have a lot more miracles if we would actually pay attention to this and understand that our bodies are temples, and what are we putting in them? Ultra-processed food, 60% of adults are using it most of the time in their diets, and 70% per kids. 70% of a child's diet is ultra-processed foods. And I've been saying for a while now that it's addictive. It isn't just the food dyes. That draws you in. But when you get into that diet, you get sugar, you get salt. And a new study from Virginia Tech that I think is groundbreaking shows that you don't stop. In other words, you're full, but you keep eating. They give you more food if you're on the ultra-processed food in this study, and you ate it. That's because there's no off switch in the brain. When you eat sugar, the brain stays on. When you eat this high fructose corn syrup, the brain stays on. And that's the problem with ultra-processed foods. Salt, too. Salt leaves the brain switches on.
So basically, there's no signal going to my brain saying, hey, man, you're full, stop eating, and you just keep going.
Exactly. And, you know, the consequences of that bring people to my office. There's the obesity epidemic in the United States, about 40% of people. There's diabetes epidemic. There's cancer that results from this, colon cancer. And a new study just showed that there's a high increase from Rutgers in breast cancer, especially in black women dying from it. 40% increased death rate over 25 years for black women that had a diet very high in ultra-processed foods. Huge problem. It leads to obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and cancer.
You know, when I was a kid, I remember looking at things like cheese, full-fat milk. You were supposed to stay away from that because that was the stuff that was going to get you big. Now there's a Swedish study that says eating full-fat cheese and cream is linked to lower dementia.
This is a huge study, and I'm not going to go on TV and say I think saturated fats are good for you, but I think the point here is we villainized them back in the 90s. We said you can eat all the sugar you want, but don't touch fats, because we thought sugar was a fuel for the brain. It turns out fats are actually the fuel, one of the fuels for the brain, and we know that omega-3 fatty acids, those type of unsaturated fats are good for the brain, but it turns out that a certain amount of saturated fats in cream cheese and cheese, 50 grams a day, helps the brain as fuel. And that's my reason for believing that dementia over 20 years in this Swedish study is diminished. And this looked at 27,000 people. This is not a small study. So I think the message here is a balanced diet. I like a Mediterranean diet is probably the best, and a certain amount of fats is actually good for the brain.
And you're staying in Europe here, 1 in 10 people in the UK, a study there, age 70 or older, could have Alzheimer's-like changes in their brain and would benefit if they started taking drugs to slow it. What's going on here?
This is another groundbreaking study that your team put together for me, because it's a simple treatment called leucine. It's something we use for treatments when your bone marrow is not making enough white blood cells, immune cells. And it's a pretty safe drug. And this drug has showed a marked diminished Alzheimer's, but also brain aging. So it may be useful beyond the Alzheimer's population. And another thing this study showed out of University of Colorado was what blood marker to look at. Rich, this is a twofer. In other words, what do we follow to see if your brain is aging, to see if your to see if your brain cells are dying, and what can we give you to reverse it? Leucine. It's called GM-CSF. It's called leucine. That may be the secret, or one of the secrets. We need further study, but it looks very promising.
So just the idea that we would know that you're developing Alzheimer's that much earlier can get you your treatment and make it so much more treatable for you if you get to it early.
Absolutely. There's an issue of inflammation. There's an issue of beta amyloid. There's an issue of tau protein. You can already battle that by being more active, by exercising more, by having that Mediterranean diet, by being engaged, staying in the game. But on top of that, we may have an additional treatment here. And we can certainly going forward, we're going to be able to tell it with a simple blood test.
Dr. Mark Siegel, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
Great to see you, Rich.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily.